Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I'm going to make a statement that is probably going to be a lot less dogmatic than things I've said in the past. But as I've told people, I've given up on this whole idea of dogma, and I'm only concerned with finding what works. Doesn't mean we can't have good rules, doesn't mean we can't have good guidelines, but we also have to know when to break those rules. We have to know when those guidelines no longer serve our purpose, even if they work 90% of the time. Now, in this case, I'm going to say that there is no one specific exercise that is required to maximally develop a muscle. And that came up because someone had asked me in the comments, they had said, did you just say that the press isn't required to maximally develop the shoulder girdle? The press meaning the strict standing press. I'm like, yeah, it's just not necessary. I'm not saying it's not a good exercise. Not saying the press isn't a really good old school test of strength, because it is. I mean, there is something very, very primal about being able to just press a heavy weight over your head, right? There's just something very primal about that, something very manly about that. But that doesn't mean that it's required to maximally develop your shoulders. Of course not. Here's the thing, guys. When it comes to hypertrophy, and I'm going to state, I will never state, for those who are purely interested in hypertrophy, because if you come to me and say that you're purely interested in hypertrophy and you don't care about your strength, you're a big floppy pussy and I don't respect you. So there's how we get around the dogma of answering this question, because as a strength guy, that's how I reconcile it. We can discuss hypertrophy while still letting guys know who care only about their hypertrophy and not their performance that they're a big pussy. And we can still make fun of those people, and we should make fun of those people. Right? I do, and I will continue to do so. They should be mocked. But hypertrophy is a requirement for strength, and we have to accept that fact. Right? We have to accept that fact for those of us who want to get strong, that maximum hypertrophy of at least the primary movers in any lift we want to do are going to have to be as big as we can get them. Okay? And in that context, we have to accept the reality and the evidence. And we cannot be delusional and claim, well, we have to do this exercise to build a muscle. Okay? There is no such thing. You know what muscles care about? They care about tension, they care about workload, they care about fatigue. Now, am I saying that joint angles and certain movement patterns don't matter for strength and strength carryover? No, of course they matter. Of course they matter to some extent. Not saying that it's the be-all end-all, because it's not. They matter to some extent. But if we're going to talk about maximally developing a muscle, there's no exercise that is required. The squat is not a requirement, meaning the traditional barbell back squat. It is not a requirement to maximally develop your quads. Now, I will disagree with people who say, well, some people aren't built to do it for their quads. No, you don't know how to teach them to squat for their structure. Okay, I will disagree with that. So we can take both stances there. We could say, no, everyone can build big quads with the squat. You just don't know how to teach the squat to your clients who can't grow big quads with it. You're failing them as a coach. Failure is you as a coach. Squat can grow big quads on anybody if you can teach it correctly for their structure, including the long femur people. I find that one hilarious. You just don't know how to teach them how to squat. But I digress. Is the squat required to maximally develop the quads? No. Of course not. No, it's not. It's a great exercise. Everyone should squat. I think everyone should box squat at least. Not required. You can develop maximum quads without squat. Right? You can develop maximum size pecs without a bench press. I think we could make the argument that the weighted dip could probably, depending upon the person's structure, probably build your chest slightly faster. Again, depending upon a person's structure, if they could safely do dips. And even in spite of that, the dip isn't required to grow your pecs. The overhead press isn't required to maximize your shoulders. Now, that being said, can we make the argument that a lot of exercise you're going to make better use of your gym time and your exercise economy? Sure, we can. Now, that's a more logical argument. It's a more logical argument that we should generally be seeking to build the basis of our training around the exercises that build the most muscle because they recruit the most muscle, right? Big multi-joint exercises should comprise the majority of your training. Does it have to be the barbell bench press or the barbell back squat? No. But they're pretty good choices. They're very good choices. And people need to decide, are you skipping these things just because you're lazy or because you really think something is better? Well, that's a good question. None of this is required. Now, that being said, are there certain movement patterns that will be required to maximize a muscle development? Say sure. Just like we were talking about other recent video, talking about triceps. If you do not move your shoulder at all and you have a completely stationary shoulder with your elbows by your sides, and that is the only tricep work you do combined with closed grip bench pressing, no, you will not maximally develop your triceps. In fact, in that case, you could be doing 6 different exercises and never fully develop your triceps because that shoulder extension is required to fully activate the long head. Now, in theory, if you did enough overhead pressing and enough chin-ups, could the long head still get enough splash over combined with all that to grow? Sure. But in this case, you're doing a lot of different exercises trying to get a secondary effect in that one head you refuse to train. But there's no one specific single exercise that works the long head. It's just you have to have the movement where you have the shoulder extension happen. Same thing with the biceps. You guys saw me doing the curls right there. If you want to fully develop the bicep, yeah, you do need to have that shoulder movement happen. That's one of the functions of the bicep. There's one of the heads of the bicep that has muscle fibers purely dedicated to that movement, to where you bring the bar up. So the elbows have to come up. The shoulder has to rotate. But a guy could build really big biceps, especially if he's gifted in the biceps, without doing it. He could probably build bigger biceps than you guys who aren't as genetically gifted in the biceps. Guys like me who aren't genetically gifted in the biceps. Plenty of guys who don't train the bicep fully who'll get a bigger bicep than us without doing that. It's called genetics. You're going to have to get over that, deal with it. But that same guy could probably have even bigger biceps if he went ahead and trained the full range of motion and actually worked that function because he's missing muscle fibers he's not stimulating. But there's more than one exercise that does that. Does a chin-up do that? Does a dumbbell curl do that to where you bring it up and raise it? Of course. So we could look at all these different functions and say, yes, to fully develop a muscle to its potential, you're going to need to actually work the different functions. Now that's a fair statement. And a whole lot of these mandatory exercises we think of don't do that. I mean, another perfect example. How about the hamstring? Hey, most of the best that we think of as big hamstring builders, big multi-joint movements, are a hip hinge. Well, hip hinging will build hamstrings pretty big. But a hip hinge can't fully develop all 3 heads of the hamstring. There's one of the heads of the hamstring that requires you to flex your knee. You have to flex your knee to activate one of the 3 heads. It can't be fully engaged with a hip hinge. In which case you don't have a lot of options. You're going to, at that point, your only options are a glute ham raise or a hamstring curl. Now, there's a case of where we've narrowed it down to only 2 possible choices. There's only 2 exercises that I can think of that can activate that head. So in that case, one of those 2 would be mandatory. You're going to have to do one of them. But it's still the only example I can think of. We still have 2 choices. That'll be required to fully develop it. Because you have to have that movement. Just like with the bicep, you have to have the shoulder and the elbow move to actually recruit all the muscle fibers in the bicep. But the point is, even with these smallest muscles, there is no single exercise that is required to fully develop them. We could argue that some exercises are a better use of your time and energy than others. That's a reasonable argument. But a person could still develop that muscle just as big, oftentimes, with something that's less efficient use of their time and resources. It just might take them longer. It might take them more hours in the gym. They might have different recovery. They can still do it. The end result will still be the same in the long term. It just might not be as efficient. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.